Hi everyone, Kathy Beltran with Sacred Dance with Trance. I'm so super excited to have Helen DaVita here with us, talking about her experience, her unfoldment, her journey, and where she is right now. I do have to tell you, there's so much that she does, so much that she is. I mean, she's a teacher, mentor, platform, transfiguration medium, a healer, an animal communicator, philosopher, color therapist, and a tutor with the prestigious Arthur Finney College. I mean, there's nothing she can't do. And I love that she's that forever student. I mean, I feel that way with certain things, but to have her here with me, this is what I was talking about, reaching for the stars, the goosebumps. I'm so excited. And I hope that I can do well in this interview. Everybody, Helen DaVita.
Hello. It's great to be with you all today. And but I've got to correct you on something, Kathy.
Okay.
I cannot do spirit art.
Okay.
I would love to be able to do spirit art, but that obviously was not in the plan. And I can't even do stickmen very well. So we don't do the stickmen.
Oh my goodness. But yes, that was a long one. I mean, like I said, what can you not do? I mean, maybe psychic art, but I just love your passion and your eagerness to learn everything, to understand so many different things, and to be a teacher, to have all this knowledge and come here today to share your experience. And that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about you, your unfoldment, how this all started for you, because that's what members love to hear. They want to connect with people and really understand that journey. So I wanted to talk about or ask you, what was your first experience that catapulted you on your journey, your spiritual journey?
Well, I think I probably was like a lot of mediums in that I used to have my spirit friends when I was little that were all explained away as imaginary friends. But I remember the story of them so well. And, I was 4 years old, 3-4 years old, and I had a 16-year-old boy as my imaginary playmate and a 50-year-old woman. And the story was about she was killed during the war and a wall fell on her when the house was bombed. And so we knew that they weren't imaginary because the stories could be verified. Wow. Now, not that anyone admitted that to me. They still told me it was my imaginary friends, and they humoured having to put extra places out at the dinner table because I'd be hysterical otherwise. But, you just go through life, and I guess you get into that phase where you're having to work in a very left brain way. You go to school, it's results orientated. And so you kind of lose that, and then you get into your career and everything. But probably one of the most significant aspects for me when I didn't realize what it was, but I was working in a restaurant. I was working in the kitchens, and I used to make all the starters and the desserts. So I'd be making prawn cocktails and peach melbas and banana splits and all sorts of stuff. We're going back a long time. I think desserts and starters have maybe become a little bit more interesting than they were then. But that was my job. And of course, at the end of the shift, you were clearing up, you were cleaning up. And one particular day, I was there on my own. I said, I'll finish up here. And I had a tape recorder, a cassette recorder. And I used to play music while I was working, and we'd all be enjoying the music, singing along in the kitchens, in the back rooms of the restaurant. And I didn't realize I'd left it on. I was recording something. I can't remember what I was recording, but I'd left the tape in. I'd left it on record. And I went away doing my work, and I thought, so I'm being a bit of a clown and a bit silly at times. I just started talking about the meaning of life. And what actually happened then, Kathy, was I don't actually know. But what was interesting was the next day I got a phone call from one of my co-workers who said, Helen, what was going on? I've just put the tape in the machine and played it in your cassette machine for some music. And there's this guy talking with all this wonderful philosophy of life and of the natural laws. And I didn't know what she was talking about. I said, please don't touch the tape, because that's really, really weird. And the machine had been locked away overnight in the cupboard, so there was nobody else. And I listened to it, and at first I'm being silly, I'm telling stupid jokes about dinosaurs. and the next thing, the voice changes, and there's about 20 minutes of a male voice talking about spiritual aspects and spiritual philosophy, if you like. I don't have the tape now. I wish I do. I didn't realize the significance of it. But I didn't remember a thing about it. And there was no break, so there was no where I'd finished and it could have paused. But what I do remember is finishing that shift and feeling very floaty, and like everything was lovely with the world and all the colors were beautiful, and something a 17-year-old who's really into sort of Queen and Motorhead and all sorts of things at that time would not normally have been thinking, perhaps. I became suddenly very alive. Wow. And in the moment. And I remember that and enjoying that feeling very much. And so it wasn't until later I thought about what was that all about. But then I, back into education. I went to a London drama school to study acting and speech, and it wasn't really for me. I was there studying it for 3 years, and I decided, I don't really want to do this, but I actually enjoyed it. It was good fun, but I didn't want to do it as a job. So I went and I carried on working in kitchens. And then I went back into education. And when I went back into education, I decided to study a number of things. And one of the main subjects for me was social psychology. I always had this awareness of the spirit world, and I always had this fascination of, I suppose, as a teenager, with the paranormal. And I did all the stupid things that everyone does, like scare yourself witless with the Ouija board. But yeah, we've all done it, haven't we? We've all been there. Well, it didn't actually scare me. I found it fascinating, but it scared my friends. And so I went into psychology, which I loved, because I was looking at consciousness. I was looking at subconsciousness. I was teaching and learning about the mind, and it opened up this world. And one thing kind of led into the other. And I ended up teaching social psychology at university. So I followed through that academic. In between, I'd been working in social care in the community. So I had a lot of times when I'd be working with elderly people near the end of their life here. So we often had conversations about people who'd passed and that. And so it was very much a part of my life. And I remember at one point picking up a deck of tarot cards and thinking, oh, this would be good. But that is the other thing, spirit, art and tarot, I can't do. But I remember feeling there's got to be some kind of niche, but I don't quite know what. But I had a sabbatical in my academic career, if you like. And during that sabbatical, I was quite unwell, but I had an experience where a child who had been missing came to me, and it was all over the news, this particular case. And she was saying that the police were looking in the wrong place. And I thought, well, who am I to tell the police, you're wrong? And they had good reasons for the search area that they had. But she was clearly in spirit. And she hadn't been discovered. Her physical body hadn't been discovered. So it was a very difficult situation. And this went on for a while. And then she showed me exactly where she was. And and that evening we drove past that spot. And there she was in my face. This is where I am. And the next morning on Sky News, that's where they showed that she had been buried. They found her there that early morning. Somebody had found her taking a shortcut, and she was then found. But I went into a severe depression about it, because not a medical depression, but I remember thinking I don't want anything to do with this and being quite angry, because I thought, if there is this phenomena and you're going to do this to me, why don't you do it before and the poor child can be spared, you know, the torment and the death that they had, you know. And after a few months, I just awoke, and it sounds very fanciful, but this is my experience. There, stood at the end of my bed, was an old man. And I mean, you know, we're really old. I mean, almost sort of a bit Gandalf-like, you know, but not Gandalf, obviously. But I don't think they brought out Lord of the Rings as a film in those days. And he just looked at me. I didn't have such long hair either, but he just looked at me and he said, "Stop feeling sorry for yourself and do something positive with this." Wow. And then I looked again and he was gone, and I've never seen him since. Wow. So I started to work with the psychology again, and I also started to investigate mediumship a lot more. And I have a very critical eye to it. You know, if someone says, "Oh, this is how it is," I'll say, "Why? And why is it like that? Give me the proof. You know, show me the studies and everything." And of course, you can't with a lot of things with mediumship. It's about experiencing it. And so I started experiencing it. I'd been meditating for years, doing transcendental meditation, which I have to say I think is the best training for trance, where you transcend conscious thought and subconscious thought, and you get to this transcendence of not wishing to control what's happening. But so I was already very aware of energy, of the mind, on an academic and a personal level. And I just started sitting for spirit, and I was having all sorts of weird and wonderful experiences, some probably because I imagined it, and some I can't explain and were definitely physically real. So this was all going on for a while, and I moved around with my partner's job, and by then I had a little baby, I had a son. And so things were happening, and my son was seeing spirit people as well, and he didn't like it actually, but you know, there was a lot happening. And eventually I moved to another part of the country, and people started calling me, which was a bit bizarre, and saying, "Can I book in for a reading? I've heard you're a medium." And I hadn't told him. And I was in a new part of the country. And I was answering all these calls and sometimes letters. People were sending me checks in letters, and I was having to send them back saying, "I don't do this." So something eventually sunk in, and I thought, well, why don't you do it? Because clearly people think you can. And I started looking around, but there were no churches, there were no circles where I lived. There were no groups. So I read everything I could. I looked at every video that I could. I don't even think we had YouTube, not as we know it now. But I remember looking at everything, and I started working with it. And then after a few years of that and doing sittings and readings, which I probably did very badly all that time ago because I didn't know any better, but there were some lovely reunions, which I was pleased about. We moved back towards London, and I joined the local spiritualist church there. And I also wanted to get involved with the Spiritualist National Union because they offered an education, a self-study education. They offered the ability to be assessed. And I'd had nothing. I'd had no circle, no training, no mentor. And I really felt I needed someone to say, "Look, you know, that's terrible the way you're doing that." And but I didn't know any better. But they didn't have anything going. So I carried on, and I just carried on doing what I'd always been doing and meditating and sitting with spirit. I began sitting in the power. And it got to the point where people were starting to ask me if I would work on platform.
Wow.
And I said, yeah, okay. And then I panicked and thought, I don't know how to do it. I haven't got a teacher. I've been and seen many, and some were very good and some not so good. There was a whole mixture, a whole range. So I enlisted on a 10-week course, one night a week, on a Wednesday night at the College of Psychic Studies, which was specifically for platform demonstration. It was a wonderful teacher, Anthony Kesner, and he's still there today teaching, and I'd recommend him any day. And what was so great was in that 10 weeks, I learned about structure, I learned about presentation, and I learned about strengthening my link. So I started working after that more and more on platform and accepting those bookings. And also I was sitting for trance still. I was still sitting, and, I was recording. And I said to the spirit world, some people say, what's the point of doing it on your own and recording it? And I said, well, if you want to teach me to speak with you, then you're going to have to talk to the recorder, because I haven't got anyone to sit with. So I used to do that as well. And then I'd been working for some years, and I started doing workshops, a whole range of things. And then I decided to go to my son was still quite young, and I felt like I really needed a break. And I said to my partner at the time, would that be okay? And they said, yeah, sure, have some time for you. You need it. You're exhausted. So I looked at the Arthur Findlay College, and they had this course that was running called, I can't even remember what it's called now, it just had a byline. And on the byline is, are you running a few circles? Are you teaching a few workshops? Come for this wonderful weekend and learn new skills. And I thought, well, that would be good for the students. So I went and I turned up, and it was actually an assessment weekend for the teacher training course, which I was unaware of until I got there. And that was really strange for me, because I had to do this assessment, and I thought I was just having this nice spiritual weekend. And in this nice spiritual weekend, I was going to get lots of tips and hints, It didn't quite, I had to work hard, and I had to do this presentation at the end, which I passed, and I was recommended. And from there, I was then asked if I would apply to go on the teacher training scheme. And I thought no more of it, but I threw in the application, and they said there was a waiting list of about 5 years. So I didn't think anything, carried on as normal, and got a phone call a couple of weeks later. And I was told that a place had become available. And even though, it wasn't 5 years, my name was kept coming onto the top of the list. So could I come next week?
Wow. That is really
And yeah, so I went the next week, and I turned up, and you have to go for sort of like a start interview, if you like, with all the teacher training tutors at the college. And you go into the blue room at the college, and they're all sat around a round, beautiful old round table in the bay window. They look like the Knights of King Arthur. And you have to talk to them. They interview you. And one of them said to me, so Helen, tell us about your journey to become a tutor at the Arthur Findlay College. And I said, I've absolutely no idea. It just happened. One thing happened after another. And they looked at me. One looked a bit puzzled, and the other smiled, and one just turned around and said, perfect answer. And so it kind of was, the journey unfolded. And so I started doing my training. Meanwhile, I'm training, I'm working all the time. I'm doing more trance, but trance was mostly confined to the home. And when I met my new partner, they're really into it. And so we'd sit at home as well. And in the red light, we never sat in total darkness. we would sit in the red light or sometimes in just dim room light, and there would be transfiguration. Now, I can rely on my partner, to be totally honest. And, you know, Jackie's the first person to say, nah, you know, nothing happened. Or, well, I'm not quite sure about that. So I had a really good judge there. And Jackie said, you know, I've sat there while you've been talking in trance, and I mean, I have bluey green eyes. I don't know, they might not show up on it. It doesn't matter. But these beautiful, big, dark brown eyes were in front of mine, and they were looking all around the room, and then they held Jackie's gaze.
Wow.
And then they just sort of disappeared. And you know, Jackie tells this story quite a lot, and it's not something I've ever encouraged. I've just allowed the spirit to do what they want to do. And all I will say is I sit for trance. And so I sit for trance, and occasionally we get transfiguration, and we've had loved ones come through many, many times, but I don't ever intend it. I just sit as an instrument. I just focus on being in that transcended state, and ask the spirit world to work with me as an instrument in any way they wish, you know, so long as it's not going to make me ill or going to affect my family, that's fine. So that's really what's happened. But of course, what I also do is I apply my own knowledge of psychology to what we do. So I am so keenly aware of when something is the subconscious mind, and when something is the conscious mind, and when something is otherworldly, if you like.
Yes.
So I've been asked many, many times to do demonstrations when I'm abroad working. I've done a couple at the college, and we had quite some incredible phenomena that was witnessed by over 50 people in the room. But it's not something I want to promote so much, or I want to develop. I just love the joy of sitting for spirit, and so long as I keep it like that, things seem to happen. If I have an ambition, it probably will all disappear.
Oh my goodness, I love your story. I love how it just everything led. I mean, you were looking for an assessment, it wasn't there, and next thing you know, everything just worked out. It was like, instead of waiting 5 years, it was weeks only, and you're like, oh my God. I mean, it's amazing. I love how you started out with you know, being, I think you said you were like 15 or 16, you were younger when you had that automatic trance experience. A lot of the members ask that because they've had that experience, and it was automatic, and they were like, was this something from spirit allowing them to know that they had this ability to do this, or work with them to do this? And you know, you telling your story, obviously, yes, I believe that's happened. I'm just so amazed. And you bring up transcendental meditation. See, that's what I understand. I understand when I first started having that type of meditation, that was easy. It worked for me. And so you having this experience and being able to have that no mind, it really helped you with that trance state.
It did. And that awareness of, I mean, the funny thing is, with most trance, there's all sorts of things that are said. Are you a deep trance medium? And, you know, and that, well, I just think, well, let's not put labels on it. Trance is trance. But, you know, I think that transcendental meditation for me worked extremely well, because what's interesting is people talk about when you're in trance, you are unaware of everything. It's almost like you're asleep. You've shut down. Your mind has shut down if you're truly in trance. And you're an instrument for the mind of the spirit intelligence to work with what you've got to express itself, whether it's words, whether it's speaking, whether words on a paper, music, art, however you work in trance, healing. But actually, what's really important with the transcendental meditation is you realize you are in this state of no mind, but you're still totally aware.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of teachings here about being unaware, and you can't be a very deep trance medium if you're aware of things. But actually, the mind is very clever. And this is an area I'd like to explore more, is the awareness of the medium, but it's still being trance. And it's a very fine line that we're talking of here. So, yeah, I find it fascinating, and I'm always applying the psychology. I'm always asking questions, and I've had my ups and downs, and I've had my focus on who's my guide and all that kind of thing. And now I work with one in trance, and we have a name for, and I identify this intelligence as male, just for the sake of an audience, if you like. I think this is why it comes through like this, rather than I've got Gandhi or I've got, Sitting Bull or something like that. I've actually got this, I believe, more of a consciousness, an intelligent consciousness. And so just for the sake of presentation and to describe it, we agreed, myself and the spirit intelligence, that we will give you a name, but we know that isn't your name in the spirit world. And if you have a name in the spirit world, I don't get the idea of giving people spirit names, but because, you're known by your soul, and your soul is unique. But that's a whole nother thing, isn't it? Yeah. That's a whole nother interview I expect with someone else. Yes. So, so I went through this phase where I had this beautiful guide, and they had a name and they had an identity, and I was very happy with them. And I thought, well, this is, I'm seeing them clairvoyantly. I had this beautiful Persian prince, Suleiman, and he came riding up on a white stallion, and then I'd be sent into the Bedouin tents with the elders and all this kind of thing. So I was having all these experiences. And then one day, and this was really interesting, and it made sense to me on a psychology level, I sat for trance and I saw Suleiman in a boat sailing out to sea, waving goodbye. Wow. And I was bereft. I'm going into trance with these tears rolling down my cheeks, and mentally and clairvoyantly, I'm communicating what's happening. And he said, I have to go because you have created my story. Oh my. And I realized at that point that what's actually happening is my subconscious and what I think should be happening. And the true essence of Suleiman is real, I believe. But I had created the Persian prince. I'd created the white stallion. I'd created the Bedouin tent and these elders who I never quite saw their faces. It was, I'd created it. The mind is just so powerful. So when Suleiman drifted, he said, I'll see you again. And I have seen him again. Oh, good. But he said, if you're going to work like this, we have to bring through somebody else for you to work with. And don't get nosy and don't create the story, just let it be. So I was getting a good telling off from the spirit world, which was really cool in a way, because I learned so much from it. We sat every week for about 6 weeks and there was nothing. And then one day, the next time, probably about the 7th week, roundabout then, I sat there and I was overwhelmed by this enormous presence of energy, almost like a great cloak being put over me. And Jackie and another friend who was coming to sit with us by then said, oh my goodness, you've got someone there with you. Now they couldn't see them. But as this energy came in, I said in my mind to them, thank you. I don't want to know what you look like. I don't want to know your story. I don't want to know if you ever lived in this world ever before. And those are the only terms that we can work together. And I felt this sense of agreement. That's all I can say, because it continued. And so we've been together for probably about 4 or 5 years now, maybe longer. And it's with this power that I work with in the trance demonstration, and I love it. And it got to a point where people would say, oh, I can see your guide. He looks just like, and I'd say, shh, don't put it in there, because once it's in there, I can't cancel it. I can try and ignore it, but I want a still mind on this, and I want this to be as pure as possible. So, yes, so it got to a point where people were saying, well, you know, we've got to have a name to refer to. We can't just say, hello, guide. And I said, you know, clairvoyantly, and I heard, and mentally, and I heard back clairaudiently, okay, call me Crane. And so whoever it is referred to as Crane. But I believe Crane is collective. But just for the way of working, you know, the name of Crane. So I've been working with this, and I'll do a demonstration, not very often, because I feel like when it happens, it's spontaneous normally, or if it's planned, it's not something on a regular basis. It's a one-off for the students. And for those students and any friends who are coming along, I don't want it to be something that is commercialized. I mean, I know people have to pay for the fees for the hall and that kind of thing, so it's no problem if they do set a price. But primarily it's for the students I'm working with, and it's an experiment every time. It's, well, I'll sit and let's see what happens. And last year I did a course in December, and Shannon Taggart, the seance photographer, was there and took some amazing transfiguration pictures that were verified with what people were saying in the room. So people were smelling the organic smells that often come in a seance, and remarking on it, because I allow everyone to talk, and they're free to stand up and take a good look if they want, so long as they don't sort of, you know, in your face when you're in that state. And so there were loads of photographs, that were taken in the light, in the red light, and there was lots of transfiguration, lots of energy, a complete change of me. I ended up looking like an old man with pixie ears.
Oh my God.
And I've got the photographs of this. This is what's incredible. Well, Shannon's very talented. She just hits the shutter, and she's what do you call them? Photojournalist by training. And she just has a passion for photographing seances, but she has they don't get photoshopped. Mm-hmm. It's as they are. And she puts no store by them. She just says, that's what showed up in the moment on the camera. So, you know, we've got some bits and pieces there. And of course, I've been teaching trance, and I've been teaching physical mediumship. The animal communication came in, the story is quite well known because I've been quite vocal about it. As I was sat with a load of eminent mediums, teaching mediums, and I walked into the room and they were laughing about it and saying how ridiculous it was that animals could communicate. And I said, why do you think it's ridiculous? And I couldn't get a decent answer. And I've always loved animals. Now, as a small child, we didn't have a lot of animals. I lived and grew up in the city. I'm one of 6 kids. Both my parents worked hard. So having animals, apart from tortoises and goldfish and budgies, was not an option. It was just too much. You know, too many kids, too much going on at home. So, but I've always loved animals, but I didn't get a decent answer. The only answer I got was, well, if you don't communicate with them in this life, how can you expect to communicate with them in the next life? And I said, well, have you ever tried in this life? And I never got a reasonable answer. So basically I did what I did, which was I went and found out for myself. And I found out there was some wonderful work being done with people and animals. I trained with animal communicators, and I developed my own way of working with animals. And actually there's a good crossover, because to be in the stillness for trance, you have to be in that stillness, and like in that transcendent state, awareness, where there is no judgment, where there's no if you like, emotion. I mean, it's an emotional language, animal communication, and that's exactly as it is, you know. But it's all through the emotion. But you have to learn to be in that state of now, that state of just acceptance and transcending, trying to control the situation. And so I was doing the animal communication, and years ago, when I was training as a tutor, one of my teachers said to me, "You've got to do a tutorial on colour." And I said, "Oh, colour, that's all new age load of rubbish, isn't it?" And so she looked me in the eye and she said, "You're going to do a tutorial on colour." And this was a lady you didn't argue with. If you did, you always came off worse. So being a good trainee tutor then, I went away and I did a diploma in colour therapy. And I have to say, it has absolutely transformed and changed my life for the better. That understanding of energy and colour and the science behind it. I mean, you think when babies were born and they were jaundiced, they would put the ultraviolet light on it. We needed ultraviolet frequencies to get the liver working again. And it goes through everything in life. And the sound, I've always loved working with sound. So I trained in sound therapy and also developed my own style as well. So there's quite a lot there to mash about, I think.
There is, and I love everything that you do. And, you know, I want to bring up, you have a bunch of CDs. Our group is here in the US, but we have everywhere. And, you know, some of us aren't very lucky to not live near you or the college to be able to do those things there. But you have these CDs, and I have quite a few of them, but I love them. I love them. And, you know, I am going to put them in the links when I do this interview, post the interview.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
To able to get those instantly, because you can. I think it's Amazon, iTunes, you know, they're just readily available to download.
Yeah, they're distributed quite widely, yeah.
Yes, and I love it. And, you know, I want to tell you, you brought up the story of the old man coming to you when you were in that state of, you know, a little bit of depression going on. About your journey, what you were supposed to do. A lot of people can relate to that, because, I mean, I've had that same experience where somebody woke me up in the middle of the night and I'm like, you know, and then next thing you know, not there anymore. So I relate to that. And I think sometimes they come to push you forward, you know, that beautiful guidance, you know, to say, okay, this, and then for you to have that vision, you're like, oh my God, I mean, I have to go forward. I have to do this because, you know, anyways, you brought up so many different things. You talked about learning this, that sitting in the power, and you did it on your own. And a lot of people thought, and yes, it's great to be in a physical circle and have somebody with you. And if you can't, but you can still sit and you can experience that blending, that when they come, when the inspirers come, and to know that difference of your energy and them coming in, it's beautiful. I mean, you know, it's so sacred to me that I almost get the, you know that I get the goosebumps all the time. So I get so excited. So I love it. It's such a beautiful blend. So beautiful. But a lot of people wanted to know that, like, is it necessary? Do I have to be in a circle? Does it have to be physical? Can I do this online? Can I sit in an online circle? What are your thoughts?
Oh, absolutely. You can do it on your own to a certain point. And so you can do all the groundwork and build up the power on your own, but it's going to be really helpful if you can either get in a circle or go on a course. Because it's after that, you need somebody to be able to observe you. You need somebody to be able to make suggestions, to talk to you about it, to even if you've gone off on the wrong track and not realized something was happening, to even work on specific aspects. So I think it's very important that even though you can work on your own and you can ask the spirit world to be your teachers, there comes a point, if you're going to work with it, where you need other people and you need a teacher or a good circle leader to facilitate, to guide, and also to give you feedback. And so I teach a lot of trance at the Arthur Findlay College, but around the world as well. And yeah, you're going to get to a point where you're going to need a bit of help. So if you really want to do the groundwork and get a good grounding, no problem sitting on your own. I always say to my students, because they say, oh, isn't it dangerous? And I'll say, yeah, the most dangerous thing could happen, which is you'll fall asleep. And that's it.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
That's it. That's the most dangerous thing that's going to happen. You know, let's remember that, you know, the spirit world have got their work to do, and they're not going to stay with us 24/7. You know, so there's going to be a point where if you've gone into trance and blended with the spirit team, they're going to say, well, you know, it's coffee break time now. So, you know, now you can go to sleep or you can wake up. But I'm being a little bit glib there, but you get the idea. It's not like, oh my goodness, just because I want them to be there, they're here. There's a cooperation happening. The online, I was very, very skeptical of it. I thought you had to be in the room and feel the energy. And yes, it's wonderful when you've got a room full of students and their energy builds. And when I'm teaching and we've got a whole sanctuary of 100 students and that energy builds, it's like you can float out of there on invisible wings. It's amazing. But online seems to work.
Yes, yes.
Now, in a sense, everything is energy. So why not? Our internet is energy. The video's energy. What we're saying is energy. Why should it not? And part of me thinks, you know, if somebody can talk to me or even through me from an invisible world, a piece of fiber optic cable running into your house is nothing. So it does actually work, Kathy. And the SNU many years ago set up SNUI, which you and your members may be aware of, but it is an online platform where teachers take classes online, particularly in countries where people can't get to groups or churches, or they're just on their own out in the sticks. And that's a really good thing. There are other ones as well. And I do individual mentoring, and I also do group mentoring and online courses. So I wouldn't do it if it didn't work.
Yes. No, and I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people did have fear, you know, like, I love how you said that. The only thing that you might be fearful of is that you might fall asleep, you know?
Yeah.
So one of the biggest things is I wanted to help people understand, mediums understand, this is just another beautiful extension of your mental mediumship. You could do this beautiful work and to release the fear. So, you know, I love how you said that. And online, okay, you talked earlier about being nosy and having those experiences. Well, you know what? Sometimes I think they're lessons for us as we're evolving and as we're learning. So that experience, you know, with you, creating the whole story about this. You know, it was necessary. You had to understand that. I mean, and I love that because it helps others understand that. But the nosy part. So I've noticed, you know, as I've sat in a online circle, for some reason, I am very nosy. It's very hard for me. There's a part of our consciousness, you know, how you talked about how you're in that transcendental meditation, that you're in that no mind, but there's still awareness. And I've noticed that in a physical circle or on a line circle, that for some reason I bring my intention or attention happening in that energy. And so
definitely,
I do agree. And I'm so glad you brought up the online courses, because that's very important to be able to, if you know, you can't go to.
Yeah, definitely.
And so I'm very grateful that you mentioned that. I wanted to ask you, in the meditations, and I'm trying to remember if you actually answered this. So is trance a passive state or an active state?
Oh, well, there's two different sides there, aren't there? There's different. Certainly the mind has to be passive But in order for it to become passive, there has to be activity. So it gets really complex, doesn't it? Now, supposing you are so passive and you're in a state of no mind, you have blended with the intelligence from the spirit world, and they're going to speak through you. Your mind will be passive, but your vocal cords and the speech centers in your brain and that connection to consciousness turning into language is going to be very active. So it's a really hard one to define, and people will argue either side, and I kind of say, well, you've got to work it out, really. And from a psychology point of view, I would say, yeah, it's a passive activity in terms of a human mind, but it's certainly active from the point of view of the spirit world, and active from the point of view if you are working in any way that uses the body. So it becomes active. So it's not a cop-out, but I can't say it is one or the other at any particular time. Yeah, difficult one, that.
Difficult one, that is. But I'm glad that you did your best at answering that, because maybe that could be a whole different conversation as well, you know?
Yeah.
You talked about sitting. Is this something for somebody that's starting this journey? Would they do this as often as possible, once a week? I mean, what would you recommend?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, firstly, there'd be more than one type of sitting. So I do believe meditation is great for mediums, but it's for you. It's not for the spirit world. The meditation is for you to learn to calm down those processes and bring those mental and physical processes back into, if you like, a kind of alignment. So the meditation is a very good practice for you, for learning how to still the mind and stop that monkey mind all the time, which we've all got. Yeah. The sitting in the power is about raising your own spiritual power to for whatever you're going to do. So it's your connection with spirit and your own spirit. And so that's where you get to know your own spiritual power, and also as that expands the awareness of spirit around you. So the sitting in the power is excellent. Meditation I'd do every day if you could, but not everyone can. So even if it's 1 or 2 times a week, fine. Sitting in the power, well, even again, if you could do it half an hour every day, great. If you can't, even if you just do it for a few minutes, 2 or 3 times a week, it's going to help. And the other one, so we've got sitting in the power, we've got the meditation, and what was the other one again, Kathy?
That's okay. Meditation, sitting in the power. I'm over here trying to remember my questions.
I know. But it was about doing, how often would we do them?
How often? Yes.
Yeah. So that would be it, really. If you had the time and you could create a nice quiet space where you're not going to be bothered and interrupted and jump out of your skin, then I would do. The trance. Well, supposing you sit for trance, I wouldn't do it more than once a week personally. Whatever is happening to you as you develop, that has to somehow be assimilated. You have to get used to it. Some experiences can be quite overwhelming and some are very gentle and hardly noticeable. I would do it once a week and set a time if you can. And just, if you can't, okay. But I would sit for trance once a week in a circle. If your circle meets once a fortnight or once a month, fine. But in between, make sure you get to know your power and how to grow it and how to accept other power around you, and also to meditate. So, but you can also sit. I'll tell you something. Actually, I'll tell you something I love. So I'm talking to one of my mentorship students recently, and she said, we were talking about this for trance, and she said, it's okay. I've got an appointment on Sunday. This was like a Thursday. And I'm thinking, my God, she's going to the hospital or something. And I said, are you all right? And she said, yeah, I've got my appointment. I've set it aside. It's in my diary. That is when I'm going to sit with my guide and invite them. and ask them to teach me.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, brilliant. I think this is great.
Mm-hmm.
She's putting it in, she's scheduling it.
Mm-hmm.
But what that did was between the Thursday and the Sunday, she was prepared. The spirit world were prepared. She made a commitment. So she made a contract. And in that contract, she had a great experience.
I love that. I actually love
It's great,
that.
isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, great. It's that in setting that intention.
Yeah.
And that appointment, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you this. Is this developing trance? Is this a speedy process? Is this something that takes a lot of time, dedication, practice?
Well, it's a very interesting question. I mean, of course, every now and again you come across somebody that you read about in history, or perhaps you even meet them if you're lucky, where it just occurs spontaneously. And obviously they're just ready. How long they'll be like that for, we will never know. We'll just have to see how things progress. Generally, we're talking of dedication for a number of years and forever, really. It's always evolving. We're always the student in this. We're always learning. So, and then, of course, you get those little forks in the road that says, well, just for a little while, I've got to go down here and explore the animal communication or the color and all that. And then you come back and you're richer for it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it really is a very long commitment. Also, because you have to get to know yourself and your own mind so well for something like trance, you don't want to rush it. And, you know, I will talk to my students when I'm teaching, and I say, if any of you start speaking within 1 minute, I'm going to stop you, because you haven't had a chance to blend. You haven't had a chance to get your mental state to a certain level. I said, I'd rather not hear from any of you for at least 5 minutes, possibly longer. I want you to hold the space for the spirit and just be with each other before you allow anything like that to occur. And so one of the things is, if you rush into it, is believing things are happening when they're not as they seem. So our own mind is so powerful, and our subconsciousness is so powerful, and our awareness varies all the time. It's varying. So to be able to say, yeah, within a year you'll be speaking, or that, you can practice it yourself in an altered state. You can practice speaking in an altered state and be fully aware. But trance, where the spirit world take over, yeah, we'd be looking at dedication for a very long time. And you never get to a point where you think, oh, I got it lit now. Mm-hmm. You know, just when, if you do, that's the day you should give up, because there's so much more and more and more and more. Yeah.
And I love how you said that, to like, sit and blend, really get to know the energy. And I find that is beautiful for me, you know, and, you know, I'm a feeler, so I love that sensation. I love the feelings, the sensations that I feel. And so, I mean, I get lost in that alone. And, but I love that. I love how you express that, you know, not to just start speaking right away, because you need to sit and blend more at first.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Beautiful. You know what, I know that you have so many videos on YouTube, and yes, I have subscribed to you.
Yay.
Like,
there'll be more. It takes a while, but there will be more.
And don't you have like a blog as well, or
yeah, I was doing a blog for a long time, and then I realized I wasn't publishing it. I obviously hadn't got the settings right, and so I then changed website, and I'm still developing my website. And I changed the blog platform, and what they just started, they asked for all the links, and it linked into my Facebook page. So they're being published now. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. And you know what, I just love, like I said, when we do this, the posting of the interview, you know, I'm going to attach all these different sites.
Oh, thank you.
Because you have such a wealth of information. such a big background of things that you do. And there's going to be the animal communicators that may be like, what? Oh my God, I've got to, just so many different things that you offer and that you teach. And I love that. I'm so grateful, Helen, for you.
Oh, my pleasure.
And your story. I loved it. I loved it because there's so many things people are going to be able to relate to. One, you know, if they've had that experience, if somebody waking up in the middle of the night, it is real. It's there. It happens because they want to get your attention. They want you to forward. But everything, I just love everything of your story, and I'm so grateful to have you on here.
My pleasure. I've really enjoyed our time together, Kathy. It's been brilliant.
Thank you. And and you have made me think deeper. You have made me think deeper on certain things, and I am so grateful to that. But again, thank you, Helen, so much for being with us.
Oh, you're welcome. It's absolutely my pleasure. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you, Kathy.
Welcome, and you have a fabulous rest of your day. Or evening.
And you too.
Might be an evening, right?
What about 4 in the afternoon?
4 in the afternoon. Okay, great. All right, Helen, have a fabulous day, and thank you again.
Take care. Thank you so much, Kathy. Thank you.